At a recent DNC Chair Forum, the candidates were asked to address some of the mistakes that the DNC made in 2016. Now, even though I think that most of the responses were adequate, the ideal response would have been that the DNC disenfranchised their own base in 2016 at the behest of Hillary Clinton, and they grew exponentially more corporatist. But most candidates did not actually address this. So, for example, Sally Boynton Brown talked about the need to support small businesses. Jamie Harrison said that we've neglected some of the states and we need a 50-state strategy. Tom Perez espoused more platitudes and stated that Democrats only attacked Trump and offered no real message. I actually agree with that. Ray Buckley said that Democrats spend too much money on advertising and that money could have been used to hire organizers. And Keith Ellison correctly said that we abandoned working people. That's also true. Now, I think that all of these are acceptable answers, and I agree with every single one of the candidates here. But there were two answers that really stood out to me. The first one came from Jamu Green, and she actually touched on what I wanted her to touch on. I wanted her to touch on how the DNC betrayed their own base in 2016. So this is what she said specifically.
We have to have a DNC leader who is willing to speak truth to power and say very specifically, I acknowledge the wounds of Bernie Sanders supporters who feel that they were left out of this election unfairly. And I also acknowledge the wounds of Hillary Clinton supporters who feel that sexism and misogyny has been too rampant in our party and in the media and how she was treated. And we have to have a leader who will speak truth to power to this institution of the Democratic Party and say we ourselves have sexism and racism and bigotry within our own ranks and that we have too much complexity. So to Andrew, your question, the Obama years were great in lifting us out of recession, but they decimated the DNC. The Clinton campaign treated this institution with disrespect. And so we need a leader who is going to speak truth to power.
The Clinton campaign treated this institution with disrespect. Look, I've been really critical of Jamu in the past, but I have to give her credit where credit is due. That's correct. So, I mean, the thing that's strange is that this is a complete 180 because previously Jamu, she dodged this question at every single turn. She refused to address the rigging of the primary. And I mean, this is surprising because Jamu Green is someone who was a former advisor to Hillary Clinton. She considers herself a friend of Hillary Clinton. Now, she also said we need a DNC chair that will acknowledge the wounds of Bernie Sanders supporters who feel that they were left out of the election. Now, this is the first time I've ever heard her address any sort of bias towards Bernie Sanders supporters whatsoever, because, again, anytime this was brought up to her, she was wishy-washy. She dodged the question. So I think this is great. Now, would have liked her to go into more detail about specifically how she thinks that the DNC disenfranchised Bernie Sanders supporters? Absolutely, but to be fair to Jamu Green here, they didn't have much time to actually answer the question. Now, there's another part in here that I want to acknowledge where I'm critical of Jamu Green. So she states that she wants to acknowledge the wounds of Hillary Clinton supporters who feel as though sexism and misogyny is too rampant in our own party. Now, look, I'm not going to deny the existence of misogyny and sexism towards Hillary Clinton, and I'm certainly not going to deny that it doesn't exist in our own party, but you have to be really careful as to what she's saying here, because that whole notion that, the Democratic Party was sexist towards Hillary Clinton, well, that's an attack on progressives. So, for example, when Hillary Clinton was attending a private fundraiser where the tickets cost more than $33,000, well, there are a bunch of Sanders supporters who protested her by throwing $1,000 individual dollar bills at her motorcade. Now, this was to protest how Hillary Clinton only allowed wealthy elites to buy access to her. And Clinton supporters, in turn, alleged that this was sexist because they were throwing dollar bills at a woman and it was demeaning and degrading. So, I mean, that's one example as to how Clinton supporters tried to demonize Bernie Sanders and how the establishment tried to demonize Bernie Sanders and suggest that that was an act of sexism when really it was the lower class calling out an elite, saying that you're not representing us, it's because of money, and they're making a statement. Now, there was another instance where Hillary Clinton also tried to further this narrative. She said that Bernie Sanders, or she implied that Bernie Sanders was sexist because he said that she needs to stop yelling when it comes to the issue about guns. Now, Bernie Sanders also said the same exact thing to Martin O'Malley that he said to Hillary Clinton that made her accuse him of sexism. He said that when it comes to the gun debate, this comes down to a difference that you can see between the rural communities of the United States and the urban communities. And we need to stop yelling at each other and come together and compromise. And she said, well, when men say that women are yelling, we're not yelling, we're just passionate. And she implied that that was sexist. Again, this is completely taking Bernie Sanders out of context and trying to misrepresent what he was actually saying so she could suggest that he was sexist. But if you're honestly trying to further the narrative that progressives disliked Hillary Clinton because they're sexist, well, I reject that. So I would like to kind of pick Jamu's brain a little bit more on this and get her take as to what she means specifically by that. And look, she agreed to come on the show. She actually brought it to my attention and said, look, she's happy to answer any questions. So I responded saying, yes, I would love to have you on the show, even though I think that she's from the Hillary wing of the party and I'm from the Bernie wing. I think that this could be a really constructive conversation. She has not responded to me, even though she seemed to be pretty enthusiastic about coming on the show. So look, Jamu, the offer, it stands. I think that it would be great for you to come on the show, but I mean, time is running out. The DNC chair race is a week away from the time that I'm recording this. So I mean, if you want to come on the show, I would love to have you. Now, I thought that that was an acceptable response. However, when it came to Sam Ronan, like he always does, he answered the question exactly how it needed to be answered. And he even called out Jamu Green in the process. Take a look.
So I'm going to take the gloves off a little bit. You talked about truth to power. I was the one that started that in Houston. You want to talk about telling people that the DNC is the only people who get to decide the fate and future of millions of Americans. I believe you said each of you get to carry the weight and burden of 150,000 lives. That is an awesome responsibility. And it's one that goes and alludes to the superdelegates. Let's take that word, for example, superdelegates. It is greater than a regular delegate. That means that those superdelegates, I believe it was around 500 of them, had the same weight as 25% of the entire voting base. Millions of votes. That is undemocratic. You want to talk about truth to power? I am the only candidate at this table who has sworn to not take corporate and lobbyist money. That is not the way we do business in the Democratic Party. You want to talk about more truth to power? We need open primaries. We need open debates. We need to get rid of exclusivity. I've been hashing off every time somebody at this table has borrowed from my Houston and my Detroit and my Phoenix remarks and my interviews. Tom, I think, has adopted my policies. You want to talk about leadership? That is leadership, leading by example. We have been hurting as a country. Bernie-crats, millennials, progressives, conservatives, libertarians. We have been at war with each other, and we've been hurting for decades, and we've been waiting for a person to step up and say, enough is enough. We are Americans. We are Americans first and foremost. We need to talk. We need to talk with each other. We need to compromise. That is politics. And until we do that, none of these plans, none of these people, none of these things we're trying to do will work.
Wow. So that's how you answer that question, folks. So, I mean, when it comes to the question as to why Jamu Green changed her position, I initially speculated, well, maybe she's, listening to the criticism of progressives. But really, Sam Ronan here is implying that he's actually changing the narrative. And I think he's right, because even Tom Perez talked about the rigging of the primary, even though he walked it back immediately after Sam Ronan said it. So Sam Ronan is influencing the discussion among the DNC chair candidates in a really positive way. And look, he kept a list of any time one of the other candidates used his rhetoric. And he even said, I think that Tom has adopted my policies. I laughed out loud when he did that. That was phenomenal. So Sam Ronan, he's killing it. And some of my viewers reached out and they said, Mike, I'm really worried about Sam Ronan because even though I support him, I'm afraid that this is going to split votes between people in the DNC, between Keith Ellis and whatnot. But look, here's the thing. I think that Sam Ronan, this isn't a traditional election, so the DNC members, I'm not too worried about them splitting votes because they're likely going to speak with each other about the vote process. So if progressives are planning on voting for Ellison within the DNC, I'm sure that they would come together and talk about Ronan and Keith Ellison and make a deal. And also, I think that Ronan's presence is really important because he is influencing the discussion in a very positive way. We've seen it here. So Sam Ronan, dude, you brought down the house. That was amazing. That's how you answer that question. And I think that he's really the only candidate that will hold people within the DNC accountable if they want to betray progressives. So, my hat goes off to Sam Ronan. And, honestly, I will give credit to all the DNC chair candidates for answering this question adequately, but Sam Ronan, he is the Bernie Sanders of this race.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.